goodness, maybe I should just stop while I'm ahead. I'll just leave right now. That was wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging. I am so grateful that I get to do these town halls and I get to listen to you, tell you a little bit about what I'm working on, and take whatever comments and questions you have, because I know this is a very, very tough time. And I know everybody is looking for answers and also what we can do to be most effective in this moment. So thank you again for being here. I want to start by just thanking United Indians of all tribes for having us here. We are really, really grateful. And I've prioritized our tribal communities since I started, and so I was really proud to secure $700,000 for the United Indians of all tribes Northwest Native Canoe Center on South Lake Union. So I hope you get a chance to visit that. And also, we are joined tonight by United Indians of all tribes Executive Director Mike Tooley. Where are you, Mike? There he is. He's just been doing such an amazing job, and this center provides such an incredible community space, gathering, but also all the other things you're working on, from childcare to housing to taking care of our seniors. So thank you, Mike. We really appreciate everything that you have been doing. This is my 129th town hall. It's my third so far in 2026. Who's coming to one of my town halls for the first time? Raise your hands. Oh my gosh, I love that. Let's give you all a round of applause. Thank you so much for being here. And for those of you who have come before, we love you too. Thank you. Please keep coming out because I think these conversations, to me, it's one of the things I love about this job is we get to have conversations about what's happening. So I really, really appreciate it. I say this a lot, but I don't think it's ever been more true that this is a really troubled time in our democracy. And we are facing so many threats on so many different levels. And I know you have questions about a lot of different things. So I thought what I'd do is just give you a few brief updates on a couple of things: the war in Iran, immigration, the Epstein files, and just the cost of living and how tough it is to get by. And then we'll open it up for your thoughts, for your comments, for your questions. We'll try to take as many as we can in the time that we have. Does that sound good? All right, wonderful. So first, on the war in Iran, my heart goes out to the Iranians who were suffering under an incredibly brutal regime for such a long time, and to the Iranian American diaspora who has family there in Iran. And I think we need to do everything we can to continue to support Iranians to have freedom, to have liberation, and to have a country that they can live in, to have safety. What is also true is that this has been an illegal and unconstitutional war on Iran. And we have to be very, very clear about that, because if we aren't, it has serious consequences for how and when we go to war with any country. And we're starting to see that already with this Trump regime, where we've declared war on Venezuela. We're apparently going to declare war on Cuba. We're going to go after Greenland. So it is very important to understand that it is both an illegal and unconstitutional war. Why do I say that? Because the founders of this country actually had a long debate about war powers and who should have the authority to decide who and when we get to go to war. And they made it very clear by putting it in Article 1. Sometimes people say there are 3 co-equal branches of government, and we in Congress always get a little upset about that, because Article 1 is really, really big. That has all the powers for Congress. Article 2 is pretty small. That's the presidential power. And so it's very important to understand that we are the first and most important branch of government. And the founders, when they were debating this issue, realized that going to war is of such consequence to our troops, to American domestic policy, but also to global stability and to our pocketbooks, right? Because war is very, very expensive. And so they made it very clear that if we were going to declare war on a country, it had to be debated by the Congress of the United States, by the people who are elected, by you, who are the representatives of the country. That is what would keep our republic strong if we actually had a debate on it and if Congress authorized it. And that debate would then be able to take into all the, whatever arguments for and against war, but at the end of the day, it would be the people's representatives who would be making that decision. There is a small caveat that the founders put into place, where it gave some presidential authority to the executive in situations where there was an imminent threat against the United States. And imminent doesn't mean 47 years of a brutal regime. It means imminent as in right now, tomorrow, coming up against the United States, that there was going to be an attack and that Congress, you couldn't, the scenario that the founders talked about is a situation where you couldn't convene Congress quickly enough, that there's an imminent attack, it's about to happen. In order to stop that, we would need to then have the president be able to declare war in that very, very limited situation. That is simply not the case. So the way that this war has been declared, and by the way, I have been a very strong proponent for Congress authorizing war, whether it was Democratic or Republican presidents, because there are other ways. This is unprecedented, I'll tell you why. But there are other situations where presidents on both sides of the aisle have used what's called an authorization of use of military force. And they've used one that was previously passed to justify current action. And the biggest example of that was the 2001 AUMF, where it was written so broadly, there was no defined person or persons or countries named, there was no defined timeline. And so that authorization of use of military force, as well as the one that came right after it, which was just repealed, were two examples of how Democratic and Republican presidents have sometimes used that AUMF. The reason, and I've been against that as well, because I think that needs to come to Congress as well. The reason this is unprecedented is this president didn't even cite an AUMF. He didn't ask for any authorization. Everything he has said has not been true. There was no imminent threat. I've been in classified briefings, but I can promise you that there's nothing that I have heard that is different from what you're hearing. And in fact, the goals for this, who knows what they are? They keep shifting. The reasons why we went in keep shifting. And so it is absolutely an illegal, unconstitutional war. We had a war powers resolution vote last week that was a bipartisan war powers resolution. Unfortunately, it did not pass, narrowly failed. There are some people who are saying that they would vote for that if the United States were to send ground troops in, but every single time the bar keeps shifting, right? It just keeps moving in terms of when are you going to restrain this president from just doing whatever he wants without the authorization of Congress. But there are other things as well that I think are really important. I mentioned the no imminent threat. There's also, and I mentioned absolutely no clear plan or goals. In fact, you might have seen today with oil prices spiking, the president went on TV and said, well, we've already had a successful war, right? We've destroyed their naval fleet, we've destroyed their air force, we've destroyed this, we've destroyed that. We could call it successful right now. It's because he's afraid, because the oil prices are spiking, and that is something he's paying attention to. But the reality is that there haven't been clearly articulated goals ever. And the administration is telling the Iranian people to rise up. But what we know is that the regime is deep and broad, and that you can't just destroy it. We have never been successful at regime change anywhere that we have gone. And I thought that we had learned that. And in fact, this president ran on getting us out of forever wars, and now we're just embroiled in so many more. And so the idea, and there was a question from Yasmin Ansari, who is our only Iranian-American member of Congress in the House, a good friend of mine, and she did ask about what is the plan to help the Iranian people in the aftermath of this war, where everything is being destroyed. And what was very clear is there is no plan. It's tell the Iranian people to rise up, and good luck to you. So this is not even about how we help the Iranian people come out of this with a country that offers them freedom and liberty. And I think that is also really, really important. Now, the other thing is the cost to Americans. We've already lost 7 US troops. And the disrespect with how this is spoken about by Donald Trump is stunning to me. The disrespect of saying, well, we've lost some lives, that's just the way it is. No, that's not just the way it is. We have to be able to debate this. And we have to recognize that we don't send people into war unless we know how we're going to get them out, how we're going to protect them, and how many troops are really at stake, how many lives are at stake. But in addition, you may have seen that Fox News, he was wearing a baseball cap for the dignified transfer of dead soldiers. And Fox News actually tried to cover it up by airing a segment from a previous dignified transfer of dead soldiers, and they admitted it because they were trying to hide the fact that the president was just wearing a baseball cap for that. And in the final footage that they aired after admitting that they had done that because they were being called out, they eliminated all pictures of him with his baseball cap. And I say this because I think if we want to support our troops, which we all want to do, the most important thing is to assess when we send them into harm's way and to make sure that we are never doing that callously or for any reason other than the safety of the United States of America. And so this is also really important. But the other thing I want to draw to your attention is the money that we are spending. This is your taxpayer dollars that we are spending. It's about $1 billion a day that we are spending on this war. Now, I'm going to talk about affordability in a bit, but you know that $1 billion a day could fund a lot of things that we need in our communities, like healthcare, like housing, like childcare. There are so many needs in our country today, in the richest country in the world, where the billionaires have so much and working people don't. That the fact that we are spending all this money on another forever war with no goal, no outcome, no authorization is very, very painful to watch. I think that this is an attempt to distract you from the other things that are in front of us, to distract you. Some people have called this Operation Epstein Fury. Some people have called it Operation Affordability Fury, because these are the things that he's hoping we can distract you from. He's hoping that if we go to war on Iran, that takes over the front page and you forget about the incredible horror of the Epstein files, which was on the front page of the newspapers every single day. And including that there were files that were covered up and held back about Trump himself, and credible allegations of abuse by him against minors. Those are the files that they were trying to hide right when he went to war with Iran. He's also hoping to distract you from affordability. You know, his team keeps telling him, you got to talk about how working people are actually going to make it here. And then he can't. He can't talk about that because he said he was going to reduce costs on day one. And I don't know about you, how many people have seen your healthcare costs rise in the last year? Yeah. How many people are worried about housing? Yeah. How many people are worried about your kids or your grandkids just getting a world that they can live in? Yeah. So these are the things that he doesn't want you to focus on. And I think that that is the main reason that he went to war with Iran, which is just horrific. Now, what are we doing about this? In Congress, we're going to continue to push for a war powers resolution. I mean, we already had one. It failed in the House and the Senate. But that doesn't mean we can't continue to bring them up. But I also think it's why it is so important that you are out here and that we're getting information out, because there's a lot of misinformation that he's trying to put out, both about the imminent threat, both about why we had to do this, about the fact that it's been a great success. And it's important that we talk about what is actually happening, because right now, the polling on this is 29% of people approve of this war. right? 29% of people approve of this war. And that is lower than any polling on any war that we can remember. Not that that's the only thing you look at, but that is an important factor. I can't believe I'm saying this, but even George Bush came to Congress to ask for authorization. Now, I was on the outside at the time. That's kind of when I got my start organizing after the Iraq War, or when we went to war on Iraq. And um, I remember being so against that because I knew that it was going to be a forever war and that we were not going to be able to institute the kind of regime change that was being discussed. And in fact, that's what happened. And so it cost us $2 to $3 trillion for that war. And a decade later, we haven't seen, between Iraq and Afghanistan, we have not seen the kind of, quote, success that Bush declared 6 weeks after when he said mission accomplished. So that is the state of things, and I think we just have to continue to push really hard. Now, I do want to say, if you know anyone that is in need of assistance getting out of the Middle East, because now the war has expanded, as you know, to many different countries, please contact any of my staff. My entire staff is here because we have a staff retreat this week. So my entire DC staff is here, as well as my district staff. In fact, can we give them a round of applause because they do just the most amazing work. And they would be happy to help you through the process of trying to get out people that you know are constituents or that need our help. So there is a process for that to help with your casework. Okay, I'm going to switch to immigration. Goodbye, Kristi Noem. I think they were playing some clips, so you may have seen me say to Kristi Noem when she was before us this week, you need to be fired, resign, or be impeached, and the next day she was fired. Of course, I take full credit for that. Just kidding. Look, she is, I think, one of the most problematic. I mean, there are a lot, so it's difficult to say who's most problematic. We're going on to Pam Bondi next, but she is one of the most problematic people in the cabinet. She has operated with a mix of callousness and corruption that is really stunning. And I think it was pointed out during that hearing. She kept saying that she kept lying, because a year ago I sent her a letter about all the American citizens that I heard were being detained. And she kept saying no. Well, she didn't respond, but when she did, eventually she was saying, no, they're not detained. We don't detain American citizens. Todd Lyons said, we don't detain American citizens. She finally sent me a letter the day before the hearing that said, well, we've detained 19 US citizens. ProPublica has a report that just in the time from January to October of last year, they detained 170 US citizens. That's just in that time, and that was pre the Minnesota surge, where we know so many US citizens were detained, much less killed, as we saw with Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And so I decided that I would bring some US citizens who had been detained to be in the room and tell their stories. And so we brought 5 US citizens who had been detained, including 2 members who had served in the armed forces. And I read their stories out to her. Of course, she didn't acknowledge any of that and refused to acknowledge that they're detaining US citizens in big numbers. I don't know if you saw, did they play the clip of my asking her what the Fourth Amendment was? Did you hear her mumble? I was like, search and seizure. What about search and seizure? No, it's not the right for the government to search and seize people. It is to protect you people in the United States against illegal search and seizure. That is a very different thing. So it was, I think, and there were lots of questions about her corruption and the way she's steered contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars to her relatives, to Corey Lewandowski, to other people that are affiliated with her administration. So I think that it's important that she's gone, but let's be clear that that is not going to solve the problem. That is absolutely not going to solve the problem. And I think that Republicans were hoping that by getting rid of her, that that would open up our willingness to fund the DHS appropriations bill, which we have been 150% clear we are not funding DHS, ICE, and CBP, not a penny more, because these are completely lawless agencies. They all have to be dismantled. They are not operating with regard to the rights of people in the United States, whether it's US citizens, legal permanent residents, or people who have been here for a long time and committed absolutely no crime. This administration is detaining 70,000 people, and I should say incarcerating, because the places that they are, quote, calling detention centers are really um, even worse than jails in terms of the conditions that people are being held in. 70,000 people every single night in for-profit detention centers. That is way bigger than the Bureau of Prisons. It is a stunning number compared to any other country in the world in terms of what we are doing to people. And they are making the conditions so horrific that they're hoping that people will just say, you know what, get me out of here because I might die. And in fact, I think we are up to, is it 39, Jennifer? 39? 41 now. 41 people who have died in those ICE incarceration facilities since Trump came into office. That is more than the last 10 years, right? There hasn't been, I mean, even before that, but certainly from the last 10 years, this is a remarkable number of people who are just dying. One of them was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner. So, and those are just the ones that are reported to me because I'm the ranking member, the top Democrat on the immigration subcommittee, soon to be chair when we take back the House. But it is really stunning. Now we Department of Homeland Security has technically been shut down, um, and the funding lapsed on February 13th. We have offered to fund FEMA, TSA, some of the other entities within the Department of Homeland Security, which never should have been combined, by the way, into the Department of Homeland Security. I don't think that DHS should have been created after 9/11. That's when it was created. FEMA was actually, I'm getting off topic off my notes here, but FEMA was actually an independent agency that was established by President Carter, Jimmy Carter, and it was specifically made independent so that people couldn't politicize relief after disasters, right? Now it's been folded into DHS, and actually they're not getting out the FEMA money like they're supposed to be getting it out. So they're not even doing with FEMA what they should be doing. But you know, we want our TSA folks to be paid. They were promised, by the way, by President Trump a $10,000 bonus after the last shutdown. They never got it. They've been taking away they've been working to strip their collective bargaining rights. So please don't tell me that they care about TSA. But we do. We'd like for people to get paid, and we're okay with funding those particular pieces, but not a penny more for ICE, for CBP, for Kristi Noem's lawlessness. So the Epstein files, I told you I'm just doing like a quick run through of some of these things, and then we'll get to whatever you want to talk about more after this. But I'm sure you saw my questioning of Pam Bondi when she turned away from those survivors and refused to acknowledge them or apologize. It was just a remarkable moment. I really feel like in some ways the hearing ended there because everybody got to see her callousness. And I have been working like this with the survivors. I've been doing a lot. If you haven't listened to my podcast, it's called The Power You Have. I've done 2 episodes with survivors. Please go check it out. I actually did one on the Iran War. This last episode was on the Iran War too. So you can get it anywhere that you get your podcasts. But you know, these women are so incredibly courageous and brave and resilient. And it is because of their ferociousness and their courage that we are even talking about this. But I have gone in and looked at the unredacted, well, the supposedly unredacted files. Many of them are still redacted. And I just have to tell you, I don't have the words to describe the depravity that is in those files. The objectification of girls, of young girls, by powerful predators and pedophiles, by people that are operating at the highest echelon of government on both sides. It's not limited to one particular party. And at the highest levels of academia, of finance, of law, people that we've held up in different ways as models of success. And when you look at these emails and you read them, it is it is so it's so unbelievable and disgusting and depraved. And it is not disconnected with how power and wealth works to suppress working people in this country. This is an Epstein class. And there is a direct connection between what happens in the banks and the way people think about working people and the way people are talking about and operating in this both figurative and literal island of immorality that they have created. And so it's been, when I first started reading the files, I have to admit that I had a lot of nightmares from those, because it's just very hard to read them. And there are thousands and thousands of emails, and I went through all of them, and not all of them, I went through a lot of them. And I'm still going through them. There was just another release because of all the push to release the files that been taken down because they contained accusations against Trump. And so when I go back, I'll go in and read the redacted files there. But there's also a lot of problems with the files. Just the recent release, I was just talking to Lauren Hirsch from World Without Exploitation, who I've been working very closely with, who's coordinating a lot of the advocacy for the survivors. And she told me that there are 21 victims who are once again named in the files. They didn't redact the names of the victims like they're supposed to. And so you have to just ask yourself, is this just sheer incompetence? Is this an attempt to, and is this an attempt to intimidate victims from coming forward, right? And so it is really that we're dealing with this all the time. And, it's shameful to me that other countries have arrested princes and prime ministers and top business people. And here in the United States, we don't even have an investigation. Kash Patel has said there's nothing to investigate. So we are pushing very hard on this, and it's not going to go away, because there is a movement now of people across this country, Republicans, independents, and Democrats, who recognize that this is wrong. And it's really only people in Congress on the other side, with the exception of a few. Thomas Massie obviously has been leading the charge. There are some women on the other side as well, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene when she was here, who were speaking out on this. And we are just going to have to continue to push and demand different. And I do think that the country is with us on this. And so it's not going to go away. And I am not going to stop pushing. I promise you that. This is like front and center. Every single person that has preyed on and been a part of this ring has to be brought to justice. There has to be accountability. And so we will make sure that that happens. Rising costs. This is my last one before we sort of turn to your thoughts and questions and comments. We know that Trump won in part because he promised to lower costs on day one. He gave the economy an A plus 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 rating. I had to make sure I got the number of pluses correct. 5 pluses. But that is completely out of touch with where people are, and I know that because I hear from you all the time, and I'm travel across the country, and I hear from people across the country as well. The war has already wasted $5 billion in taxpayer dollars. That's enough to cover SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, for 2 million Americans a year. 15 million Americans are losing health care because of the Republicans' big bad betrayal bill. That's what I call their one big beautiful bill. I call it the big bad betrayal bill, because it was such a betrayal of the American people. That passed last summer, and because of that, 15 million Americans got cut off of health care between Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. 22 million more Americans are set to see their premiums dramatically spike so that they lose healthcare because of the refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And across the country, we're seeing people whose premiums now are $20,000 to $25,000 a year. That's just for health insurance. And so I, you may know, am the lead sponsor of the Medicare for All bill for universal health care in the United States. And that is not a pie in the sky, because any existing healthcare system that we had, and the Affordable Care Act did extend healthcare for so many millions of Americans, for sure, but the private insurance companies have figured out how to game the whole system. They're vertically integrating, and they're charging you for the insurance. They're charging you when they direct you to their clinics that they own. They're charging you when they direct you to their drug stores and pharmacies that they own. They're charging you at every step of the way, and they're forcing you into a system where you only get to engage with them. And now they're using AI to determine whether or not your doctor gave you the right diagnosis and prescription for your whatever illness you have. And so I really believe that this is the time, and we have been doing a lot of work on Medicare for All. But at the same time, there is nothing that separates us from wanting to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And we were able to get that through in the House with 17 Republicans voting with us. It's kind of remarkable. But the Senate, I respectfully say that the Senate is the place where all good things go to die. The Senate has not done anything about it. And so we still have this situation where people have not been able to get their health care paid for. Now, on top of that, job growth has slowed. Unemployment is now at the highest level that we've seen in a while, back to 4.4%. The US economy lost 92,000 jobs in February. And all of this as Trump's reckless trade wars and his refusal to protect consumers from corporate greed are just raising prices on everything that you buy, everything that you go to the grocery store for. I also just wanted to quickly note, this is not on affordability, I'm sure it'll come up, but we'll talk about election security because I know that's a topic that comes up all the time. I do want you to know that we have stood up an election security task force within the Democratic caucus where we are mapping out all of the threats that we can imagine and ones that we can't, trying to get to the ones we can't imagine, and what the level of concern is. So we have sort of a matrix where, like, how much do we have to worry about this one? How much damage could this one do? So that we focus on the highest impact and highest probability threats first, but that we have responses for everything. And that includes court filings. It includes challenging things that are happening right now to try and get the electors to do what they did and falsely declare elections or not declare elections for the winner. It includes doing training for poll workers, because so many poll workers are leaving that position. They're all volunteer positions for the most part, and they got so threatened in the 2020 election that it's been very tough. And so we're trying to make sure we're training people, we're getting as much readied as possible, challenging things that Republicans are doing right now, and then shoring up our elections in the states where we do have Democratic control. But obviously, he only needs about 15 states, as he's himself said. And so we just have to make sure that in those Republican states that we also are ready to, to really take that on should that happen and should he try to steal the election. I do want to say at the same time, let's walk carefully with a foot in each. It's a tricky issue because on the one hand, we want to be prepared, we want to be ready, we want to acknowledge that this is a reality. On the other hand, we don't want people to lose faith in the current election system and feel like the election's already been stolen, so we're not going to vote. That actually delivers them what they want. So I tell people, let's try and hold both things, right? It is a real threat. And there is no evidence that we have yet that this is not going to be a fair election. Don't let him talk you into the idea that your vote doesn't matter and therefore you shouldn't vote, because that will certainly be the end of us. So that's, I think, a very important piece. Okay, last thing is I don't want you to feel, I know this is a lot and we're going to get into some, I know a lot of different topics, but I don't want you to feel like things are hopeless because hopelessness and powerlessness are tools of the oppressor. That is exactly what they want you to feel is hopeless and powerless. It is a strategy to flood the zone, as they say, to have so many things that you don't know where to turn your attention to. But what I want you to remember is as much as it doesn't feel like we are winning, and we have a long way to go to make sure that we return our democracy to the American people, it is true that we are winning. And the things I would say to you are number one, you can just look at the polling to the extent that you care about polling. Um, there is a lot of polling out there that shows that this is the most unpopular president that we have had in a very long time. And that was not the case a year ago, right? That was not the case. On things like the economy, on things like immigration, he was riding pretty high. And he had actually convinced a lot of people, maybe there were even some in this room, that he was going to do good for the American people. And so people were frustrated. They put their faith in him. But that is not the case anymore. These are the lowest poll approval ratings for a president that we have seen in a long time. It's negative 21% is his net approval rating, negative 43% from independents, right? So this is really important data because it doesn't just happen on its own. It happens because people are speaking out and because people see what is happening and they want to change it. Even 1 in 5 voters who back the president in 2024 think he's gone too far on immigration. Kristi Noem has achieved the impossible. More than half of Americans now believe that we should abolish ICE. That was not the case some time ago. 59% disapprove of the war in Iran. But in addition to that, I know there's tremendous frustration with the Supreme Court. Believe me, I have it. The shadow dockets of the Supreme Court, the way that they just make a decision on something, the way in which the corruption of some of those justices, it's all about the billionaires that buy them a luxury RV. But the lower courts have been doing a very important job. And I think it's important to recognize that because there have been 150 actions that have been blocked by the courts. There's another 107 pending. Even the SCOTUS ruling on tariffs was an important 6-3 decision against the president. And that includes, by the way, these lower court decisions includes judges who were appointed by Donald Trump himself. So there is still some hope in the court system. And of course, Attorney General Nick Brown here in Washington has been leading the way with attorney generals across the country. He's already filed 50 lawsuits. We've been the most prepared of all the states. And actually, Governor Ferguson, Attorney General Nick Brown have been helping other states. And we've also protected 14 billion of cuts just to Washington state alone through those lawsuits. So there is some success there. And on immigration, which is near and dear to my heart, as you all know, Kristi Noem is gone. I don't want to tell you that ICE and CBP have pulled out of Minnesota. It's not true, but they have had to change their tactics, at least nominally. It might make it a little harder for us to fight them, but they do have to now account for Renee Good and Alex Preddy being murdered and all the things that have been happening in Minnesota. So look, this has been a hard fight, but we are here for the whole thing because we believe so deeply in this country. I came here when I was 16 years old by myself because my parents believed that this was the country that was going to give me the most opportunity. And to now be able to be in the United States Congress and to represent you and to make sure that I and we are paying it forward for our next generations is still the most important thing that I promise you I will never stop fighting for. So thank you all so much. And we are ready for your questions. So we have 2 microphones on either side. Now you can imagine that after 129 town halls, I have figured out how to do this. So they will hold the microphone Don't try to take it away from them. They will hold on to it. And you will have a minute for your comment or your question so that we can get as many in as possible. So just go ahead and line up here, and looking forward to this discussion. And let's see, why don't we start right here with you, Michael?
Hello, testing, testing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Sorry, I'm taking the thing. Just real quick, I'm concerned because it seems to me that there's a lot of venom pointing towards the president, but when the Congress people and the senators get amongst each other, they come across as a bunch of friends, and there's not a lot of hardcore, I'll say, attacking for
Yeah.
some of these people, and I think that needs to happen. I think we're relying too much on probity, and we're going to be good colleagues, and we need to slam them.
Yeah. I mean, I really agree with you. And look, I work with the most unlikely allies. Okay. I have a bipartisan bill to ban stock trading for members of Congress because I don't think we should be there trading stocks. I think we should be, and that bill is with people like Chip Roy, right, who I agree with on very little. So there's certainly a place for us to work together, but I agree with you that we have to really be hard nosed about this. And I would say that it's particularly in the other chamber where there's this sort of like, oh, we all work together and we like each other. And sure, we like each other, but what we like more is the Constitution of the United States of America. And that's what we have to stand up for. So I think you see it much more in the House because where people being willing to take on others, because we have to run every 2 years. That's why it's called the People's House, right? Because we're closest to the people. Um, but the senators run every 6 years, and there's less diversity of age and everything really there. And so there is this kind of lingering, this is the way it used to be. There was a time when that's how it was. That's not this time. This guy is running roughshod over our democracy, our Constitution, and the Republicans are letting him do it. They are letting him do it. And so we have to talk about them as well, and we have to be just as hard nosed. Great. Mike, hey.
Thank you.
They won't even let you hold it,
Yeah,
Mike.
the one thing I worry about is fascism, as everybody's probably here is aware that. The Dominion, they won a lawsuit from Fox News about, I think it was about 5 years ago, for about $790 million.
Yeah.
That being said, all of a sudden, right off the bat, they sold to a right-wing entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What would be those protections for voters going forward in this coming year? Now that it doesn't look so, shall I say, upstanding with this new owner of these voting procedures.
You mean around taking the information of individuals
Well, I would
and
say
using?
I guess maybe the voting machines would probably.
Oh, the voting machines
Yeah,
with
'cause in
Dominion.
my
Uh-huh.
mind,
You
there's
mentioned Dominion, yeah. So, I think now we've established ways to determine the efficacy of the voting machines, but what they're now going after is mail-in ballots. If you saw the president this morning, he was talking about the fraud and the Save America Act, which barely passed the House on partisan lines. I don't think it'll pass the Senate, but he's threatening to not sign anything into law unless Republicans pass that. He's withholding his endorsements. So their new tactic seems to be around going after mail-in ballots and forcing IDs for people. And remember that if you have to have an ID, you have to come up with a birth certificate. Your birth certificate, 50% of Americans don't have birth certificates. 50% of the country, 50% of women who are married have a birth certificate where the name is different from your ID. And so if you have to have a birth certificate, that's also going to be a big challenge. So that's now what they're focusing on. But we have done a lot to try to secure the voting machines and cybersecurity. We're always worried about Russia and other actors getting into our voting machines. And I think we're just trying to do whatever we can. Again, we can do it in states like Washington because we control those things. Because voting is a statewide thing, it's much harder in some of the other states. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Before I ask my question, I want to make a suggestion to everybody here. If
you're going to fly in the next few weeks and you're going through security, please say thank you to the TSA agents
Yeah.
because they're all working without pay, so you can go
Yeah.
through. So my question is, what's the probability that come about September, October, Trump might just declare the Democratic Party as a first organization and outlaw?
I mean, there were so many things I thought were not possible that have been happening, so I don't think we can take anything off the books. He's had a couple of executive orders to basically give him huge latitude to declare any organization a terrorist organization. I think that that would be, look, a lot of this is going to rely on the people of the United States. You know, I do something on the other side, my campaign side, called Resistance Lab. I don't know if anyone's taken my Resistance Lab training. It's awesome. And that's really about the idea that in authoritarian regimes, the authoritarian person, ruler, has never been brought down by legislatures or by the courts. It's only happened when people, through large-scale movements of the public. And so that would be a moment where we would expect a big shutdown, a big demonstration of the people. I mean, there are going to be moments coming up where that may need to be the response. But you know, we are obviously, if there are lawsuits that come up, we can file amicus briefs. We can challenge things in court, but it's certainly a possibility that we can't write off just because there's so many things that have happened that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I lost my voice. I voted
Oh,
for you
sorry.
every time when I lived down in Madison Park. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
2 questions, and you can choose which one you want to answer or answer both.
Uh-huh.
While you are pushing back on Epstein files, and thank you again,
Yeah.
what can we do to support that
Yes.
resistance as a people and
Yes.
constituency? Second question, what is your concern with your colleagues that we can know about as American citizens on the new Ayatollah who has been announced as of yesterday?
Yeah, thank you. So on the Epstein files, what is most important is there's going to be a big conference of survivors coming up in June, the first weekend of June. And we're going to tie that to some legislative action to really elevate Virginia's law, which is the legislation that was introduced in honor of Virginia Giuffre, that gets rid of the statute of limitations for civil actions for sexual assault survivors. And so that these moments of, you know, coming together as a country to demand that, obviously you have a member of Congress that already is supportive of this, but can you find 10 people, and I would say this for any issue that you care about, can you find 10 people in your network that are in other states or districts represented by either Republicans who haven't spoken out, or on some issues even by a couple of Democrats who are not with us on things that they should be? And can you activate them to call their legislator? Can you write an op-ed about this? If you are a survivor yourself and you're willing to talk about it, and there's no pressure here at all because there are many reasons people don't want to, but what are the networks that you have, survivor or not, that you can put to use and continue to keep this at the top of your agenda? That is the single most important thing. And I think the second thing is really getting ourselves ready for what we were just talking about. You know, that's what Resistance Lab is about, is like preparing yourself for the tactics that have worked in other countries, learning from experts around the world on how we make an authoritarian regime's actions backfire nonviolently. And that is, I think, extremely, extremely important. So those are the things I would say. On the new Ayatollah, look, I think that this was just, we knew that it is not a reality that the United States is going to choose the next leader of Iran. That is not, the Iranian people should choose their next leader, not the president of the United States. And we know that the regime was deep. We know that Trump himself said that they killed both their first, second, and third choices. We don't get to determine those things. That's why regime change doesn't work. And I think that we have the same concerns with this individual as we did with the last. There's only been 2 leaders, right? And people thought with the first supreme leader that it couldn't get worse. And then we got Khomeini. And so I think we have to, and now we've got Khomeini too. So I think we have to be very clear that this is not a strategy for freedom or liberty of the Iranian people. And so we have the same concerns because obviously he's the son of the previous leader, and he has a lot of the support from the same quarters within that regime. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Santana Jones. I'm a political influencer, streamer. I
Awesome.
stream daily in front of thousands of people. I debate MAGA. I speak to people who care about democracy.
Yeah.
One thing that we've noticed is that the Democratic Party as a whole has an issue with messaging.
Uh-huh.
And one thing that isn't happening to the highest level is being able to impact the social media sphere. The right has kind of a monopoly on podcasts and the different people
Yeah.
that actually get messaging out. Myself and other influencers have tried to make sure that we're combating it. What are you
Awesome.
and the Democratic Party willing to do to help combat that? And then also,
Yeah.
are you guys looking to align with the influencers that are out here doing the work every day as well?
Yeah, awesome. Where's Jacob? Jacob, are you here somewhere? Raise your hand. Okay, good. That's Jacob. Talk to Jacob. We have a whole program around influencers. We've been doing a lot of collabs. We've been reaching out. We've been trying to get you content because we know that that's important. Now, it's sad. This is new for a lot of people in the Democratic Party. I shouldn't be one of the people with a high following, but I am. And that's because there's too many other people not doing what they should be doing. So we do have to find a different way to communicate, and we do have to talk to people that are not our regular folks. So we're really interested to hear whatever you have to say. We have people like Maxwell Frost, who's been really awesome in pushing the entire Democratic caucus in the House to do this kind of work. And we've in a lot of our recent things, we've had influencers come to DC, and there's an influencer tent, and but not everybody is comfortable doing that kind of communication. But we can work with people like you, like others, to really make sure we're getting that content out there. So I think of you all as being a very important part of our ecosystem, and thank you for doing that work. I just think it's really, really important.
Hi, thank you for having two questions. One is, do you think Mark Wayne Mullen is going to be any better than Kristi Noem? Is there a possibility of fighting back on his confirmation? And thank you for keeping DHS shut as long as it can be. And the second question is it a possibility that with blue states having lots of tax dollars, more so maybe than red states, that we can withhold them in escrow accounts until we have determined that fair elections have actually occurred?
Yeah. The second one is complicated for a whole bunch of reasons because there is government funding that goes to fund programs that we care about. And so it's a very, I tend to come out on the side of that's probably not the best place to withhold our economic power, but our resistance lab on Sunday was all about using economic power. And this question came up quite a bit. So I think it's worth continuing to talk about, but are there other ways that we can use economic power to bring down the pillars of support that are supporting the administration without hurting working people who do need those tax dollars in order to pay for SNAP and childcare and so many housing and so many other things that the federal government does uniquely, right? On your first question about Mark Wayne Mullen, I don't think that's going to change anything. Look, he has quite a colorful history. You can look at some of that history. I'm so diplomatic, aren't I? This is what I've learned over 10 years of being in Congress. And I also think that it is about the culture of that entire DHS. I don't think you can change that. Even if he were the best person in the world, which I don't believe he is, I don't think you can change that culture. I think you have to dismantle DHS, and you have to dismantle ICE and CBP, and you have to rebuild agencies that actually care about what they're doing. Remember that ICE, by the way, was never an agency until after 9/11, right? When DHS was created. Then they created ICE. But immigration is a civil system. It is not a criminal system. That's why people in the immigration system, second in complexity only to tax law, by the way, immigration law. That's why people don't get public defenders, right? If you can afford an attorney, or if you happen to be able to find a pro bono attorney, like from Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, then you get an attorney, but you're not provided with an attorney the way that people in the criminal justice system are. So prior to ICE being created, immigration enforcement was done as a civil matter out of the Department of Justice. So anyway, that's a digression. But to Markwayne Mullin, I hope that we can have people fight back, but Fetterman has already said that he's voting for him. The gentleman that asked the question about comedy, the first question, you know, like you have to agree, you have to like everybody and be cordial and all of that. That's what the senators are saying now. They're like, oh, you know, he's a fine colleague and blah, blah, blah. I do think that there won't be many Democrats voting for him, but that unfortunately you just need a simple majority to pass. And so the Republicans will likely be able to move that confirmation unless something big comes out. So he's a senator now. What's that? He would stop. Yeah. He would have to step out of the Senate in order to be a cabinet secretary. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Kadesh Hendrickson. I am a war veteran of the Iraq War. I served in the Army for 12 years.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to read a tweet that you wrote a couple days ago that says, so instead of demanding that Israel not bomb Iran, we let Israel force us into a forever war with grave consequences to American lives and taxpayers. Netanyahu has tried to convince every American president to attack Iran, but Trump is the only one naive enough to do it. As someone who is LGBT, I wonder how the political party who claims to support LGBT rights can see the LGBT youth and young women of Iran taking to the streets for freedom and getting massacred for it, and then treat them like violent villains. I have seen Democrats at protests express mourning for what they call the unjust death of Khamenei. After we all saw how the left celebrated the assassination attempts of Trump, a president who would never massacre tens of thousands the way Khamenei did. I'm not a Republican. I voted for you. I am hurt by the hypocrisy. You say if Iran wants, they should work for it non-violently. Can you suggest an actual working plan to help the LGBT of Iran? And please do not make the excuse that only America matters when the Democrats have supported Ukraine and Palestine. So far in my support of Iranian people, all I have seen out of Democrats is them screaming at Iranians for accepting help from the wrong people. When someone is under attack, they don't ask the political affiliation of a good Samaritan who steps up to help. If Trump came to you for authorization, would you have given it?
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you for your service. That is to be celebrated by everybody. So we once again applaud you for that and really appreciate it. My heart goes out to the more than 30,000 people that were killed in just the most recent protests by the brutal Iranian regime. There's no disagreement about that. The disagreement, if there is one, comes about what to do about it. And to me, if we were going to go into Iran, we would need to have very clear goals. We would need to have an exit strategy. We would need to be prepared for a long war. Because I don't believe that going in and bombing Iran and then leaving the Iranian people to fend for themselves is the way to go about it. You asked me if I would vote for an authorization of use of military force if Trump came to me right now to ask for it. The answer is no, unless I saw something much better than what I am seeing, including in classified briefings that I've been to. I have not seen, if we just said that we were going to go and take out every brutal dictator, there are many of them around the world. I've spent a lot of time on Sudan. I've spent a lot of time on places around the world. And what I have come to feel over decades of doing this anti-war work is that bombs are not the answer. Bombs are not the answer. And I wish that I could tell you what is the answer, but I do want you to know that we stand in full support of the Iranian people. We stand in full support of the freedom and liberty of the Iranian people to choose their own leader who gives them that freedom and support. And we know that that's not what's happening with the current regime, but bombing Iran and the scenes that we're seeing and the war that has now expanded to so many countries around the world, as well as what it says about the United States' ability to take unilateral military action on anyone. What does that say? We may agree with it now, but do we agree with it the next time he does it? And what is the process for that? So to me, all of those are part and parcel of why I have been a very dedicated anti-war person since I started organizing around the Iraq War. I just think at the end of the day, we need multilateral coalitions, we need diplomacy, we need development, we need things that are going to help lift up people around the world, because that is ultimately the way that we address these. And it doesn't feel satisfactory in the moment when you see the brutality. But it also is not satisfactory to watch the bombing of people across the Middle East and to think about what that means for, um, for the future of the world. So humanitarian assistance, making sure that we are keeping communications open in Iran. There's so many ways that we should be engaging. And by the way, how about not deporting Iranian Americans who are here in this country, not putting Iran on the banned list for people who are trying to escape that brutal regime? Those are all things that Donald Trump has been doing. So it's hard for me to believe that this is out of the goodness of his heart for the Iranian people, which I do believe the questioner has at the core, is a deep concern. Thank you for the question.
Good evening, Congresswoman Jayapal. First of all, thank you for standing firm during the recent parts in Congress. It's not easy, and many of us appreciate you holding your line. Although the current state of our democracy is a disaster, I'm quite optimistic about the Democrats taking back their House and potentially the Senate for the midterms. Due to this forecast, my question is about the future. Since 1929, the House has been capped at 435 members, which means each representative speaks for about 760,000 constituents, and some districts even more, which makes everyday Americans compete with PACs, donors, and corporations for a chance to be heard. 435 members is not the number that can be found in our constitution, nor is traditional. It's just a number from hundreds of years,
That's right.
years ago. As one of the biggest progressive voices in the party, is Progressive Caucus interested in expanding the House? Are you planning on building a coalition to introduce the legislation on capping the House of Representatives?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Very important question. You got it all in a minute. Good job. Yes, so you're absolutely right. There's no magic to 435. It has constantly been adjusted, and it absolutely could be. You've also raised a couple of other really important points. I mean, first of all, I think we should get voting rights for DC and for the Virgin Islands, for Puerto Rico, if Puerto Rico chooses that for their future. These are some of the things that really undermine the current voice of the people. Number two, I think we really need to get big money out of politics. We need to get money out of politics. When you elected me in 2016, I was one of only 4 members of Congress who didn't take any corporate PAC money. And to this day, I haven't taken corporate PAC money for my election. And I really look at this now. There's about 60 members of Congress now that don't take PAC money, but that means there's a lot more that do. And I really look at this as the scourge on democracy, because now these corporate PACs and these other identity PACs or issue PACs, whether it's AI, crypto, APAC, all of these entities are spending tens of millions of dollars on a blue seat election, and they're buying seats, and it comes in streaming in at the last minute, right? $50 million, $10 million from people who are outside of the district. So one person in Chicago can put in $1 million against one candidate. And it's never about whatever issue they're advocating for, right? It's usually just attacking them on some basis of lies, but because it runs across television and it is still a very powerful platform and digital, it really hurts. And so we have got to, that's why I have a We the People constitutional amendment to say corporations are not people and money is not speech. Um, it's why we have a number of bills that I've co-sponsored to get money out of politics, but I think that is really important. And then I also think we need to completely, just like you said about Congress not being tied to 435, the Supreme Court doesn't need to be tied either. And it has been expanded in the past and it can be expanded again. So I'm on the bill to both expand the Supreme Court and to put term limits on the Supreme Court. To me, those are all part of the democratic, the way that we preserve our democracy. Thank you for an excellent question.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
We may have an opportunity with the next presidential election, maybe the next congressional election then, to have some compromise, to have some reform in the immigration policy field. There's going to have to be give and take on both sides. What I'd like to hear from you, since this is your area of expertise, what would be what you are willing to give up, as well as what you think would be rational, feasible reform in immigration?
Great question. I will try not to go on for a long time about this because it is very much a part of how I started all of my work organizing. Look, in 2013, there was a bill, a bipartisan bill, 67 bipartisan votes in the Senate for a comprehensive overhaul of the immigration system, which at that time had not been overhauled in over 20 years. Now it's been over 30 years. So we are operating an immigration system that has not been reformed or modernized since the 1960s, right? 1970s, depending on what you want to call as real reform. There's been some tweaks to it that have mostly been bad, but we're operating with quotas that were set from a long time ago, and our country has changed dramatically. So my belief is that unless you do that basic reform, where you give a path to citizenship to those people who have lived in this country sometimes for decades, right? You could establish a year limit and say, if you lived here for 15 years or more, if you're married to a US citizen, if you have US citizen children, and you have not committed any crimes, then you should be able to have a path to citizenship come out of the shadows. In addition, we have to completely reform the family immigration system because right now you can try to sponsor your kid, but if you're from the Philippines and you're a legal permanent resident, it may take you 20 years to get that. And by then they're aged out to a different category and you can never be with them. So we really need a way to reform the family system so that people who have gone through the process and have done everything right and legally don't have to wait for 20, 30 years or maybe ever for them to be able to be with their families. Now, the big thing is once you've done all of these things, then you have to enforce it. And you have to go after employers because employers who bring in undocumented immigrants as guest workers or undocumented or whatever, those are the people that are trying to undercut the system. And so once you've got an immigration system that actually works, then you will be able to enforce the laws the way you need to. We gave up a lot in 2013. I was for that bill, even though it had enormous amounts of border security, which we've far outdone by now. We've put way more in that was in that bill, and it still hasn't stopped it. Because the fundamental truth is we advertise to everyone around the world what a great country this is. And there are a lot of people who are trying to escape terrible situations. We can't take everybody, but we do have to have a functioning system. And that is what will ultimately undermine the cartels and stop people from going to the border when we've cut off every other, under this president, we've cut off every other legal way. We can't act like this is just something we can shut our eyes to and still continue to benefit from the labor of immigrants across this country who are working in every single field and who have contributed so much to this country. If you eat fruits and vegetables, if you go to the doctor, if you stay in a hotel, whatever it is that you do, I promise there are immigrants who are supporting that work. And so we just have to recognize that. But what happened in 2013 is what the Republicans have been doing. When that bill came to the House, John Boehner was the Speaker of the House, passed with 67 bipartisan votes in the Senate, People like Lindsey Graham were crafters of that bill, believe it or not. I was for it, even though it had things I didn't like. I gave up a lot in that bill. But I felt like if we were reforming that system, that's what we needed. That was the give and take. Came to the House, and John Boehner was the speaker, and he refused to bring it to the floor for a vote. Why? Because the hardliners in his party knew if he did, it would pass. And if it passed, it would take immigrants off the table as the ones to blame for everything that is going wrong for Americans. It is not immigrants who are raising your rents, it's the billionaires. It's not immigrants who are driving up your grocery costs, it's the billionaires. And yet we continue to blame immigrants and to treat them as if they're criminals. And you know what? Immigrants have helped build this country. And we just need to recognize that we need a process that is modernized. There are lots of give and take, but what you can't do is you can't actually not fix the underlying system and just say we're going to put a wall at the border. Walls don't work. It doesn't work that way. People are in desperate situations. We need to renew our refugee process. We need to actually invest in judges in the immigration system so that we can process asylum applications. Why do people have to wait so long for asylum? Because there aren't enough judges for their cases to be heard. And so you end up having this giant backlog where somebody applies for asylum and it takes 8 years, 10 years to actually process their case. So there's lots of ways we can fix this, but it requires a willingness to stop blaming immigrants and to actually fix it. That was relatively short for what I normally say in response to an immigration question. Yes.
And I'm letting you know we have about a little over 15 minutes
Okay.
left.
Okay. How many questions do you want to do? Do you want to take all of them on this side?
I guess.
Or divide it?
Maybe let's do 5 and 5. And
Okay.
see where we're at.
Okay, that sounds good. And I'll try to keep my answers short. So we'll do 5 questions all together, and then I'll try to take notes and do 5 answers all together. Go ahead.
Hi there. First, I just want to say thank you for standing up to Cam Bondi. That is an example of how all of our elected officials should stand up
Thank
and
you.
advocate for survivors. As a survivor myself, and someone working in the gender-based violence movement, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm hearing background noise and it's really distracting me. At the same time, victim survivors here in Washington are not getting the services and mental health care that they deserve. Just last week, Virginia Mason Franciscan Health decided to close their sexual assault nurse examiner program at St. Michael's, which cuts off pediatric forensic exams in Kitsap County, all of the surrounding counties, basically the entire peninsula. Children who were raped do not have access now to a forensic exam conducted by a professional.
Yeah.
Our advocacy centers are not staffed 24/7. We have significant service gaps in Snohomish County, King County, Pierce County. And I just want to say that I so appreciate the work that you all have done. And I also wish that survivors who didn't happen to be assaulted by someone with a famous last name were getting the same attention.
100%. Yeah, thank you so much. And I will respond. I'm just going to take all 5 questions. Yeah.
Congresswoman Jayapal, my name is Kevin Simeon. I am a 2023 Rangel Fellow, and I'm waiting to join the Foreign Service. As you know, the Rangel and the Pickering Fellowships are federally funded programs which provide education and training for the next generations of U.S. diplomats. Unfortunately, currently fellows have now been delayed onboarding for nearly a year with zero information about when or if we will ever be onboarded. I tried reaching out to your office via email about this, but I haven't heard anything back yet. So I wanted to ask directly as a 2023 Rangel Fellow myself, and on behalf of the broader Rangel and Pickering communities, what actions are you taking in Congress to support and protect these vital diplomatic programs?
Great, thank you.
Last week, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse stood up in the Senate and read into the record a detailed description of the relationship between Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and Russia. He also had a list of the bibliography of his sources that he read into the record as well. What is being done in terms of enlisting forensic accountants and forensic cybersecurity specialists to dig into the physical, financial, and electronic malfeasance and corruption of this administration to get it into the public record and then lay the foundation for future criminal and or civil prosecution?
Great, thank you.
I will be quick. I'm an American, Iranian, we are together, and unfortunately, as I anticipated, I am disagree with a lot of things that you said about Iran, my people, Iranian, and So you say you're standing with people of Iran. Nayak is lobbying for a terrorist group, which is IRGC, and you voted for him, right?
No, but I'll
So
respond. Go ahead.
IRGC is a terrorist group, right?
Yes,
Okay, you agree. Nayak is lobbying for that group, for the IRGC.
I'll explain.
You endorse Nayak.
Yes.
That means you are supporting
I'm sorry, I
IRGC.
thought you were asking me about the resolution that went to the floor, so.
Reminder, if you are standing with the people of Iran, you cannot support Nayak because Nayak does not support it.
Yeah, it's just a minute, so for everyone, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hi.
I'm also an Iranian American. It's important.
Yeah, it is.
For Americans, it's important. So I understand that you said it's going to have human costs, and I agree with you, but we Iranians have a different perspective. We believe if you put pressure on the regime, it's going to fall. And it's important for the safety of American even to put more pressure to eliminate the regime, because the regime is going to cause more problem in future. And we Iranians are afraid if they stay, they go to every Iranian house and kill them. They will do that.
Thank you. Did you want to take the last two also? Just take the last, yeah.
With climate change, slightly different topic here. We're kind of like the frogs in the boiling pot of water. It's getting hotter and hotter all the time. What are you doing to make progress on this issue? Because unlike the frogs, we can't jump out.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lucian Farmer, and I am a young trans woman residing here in Seattle. My concern regards the rights of trans people like myself. Repeatedly, Republicans have used us as a boogeyman to galvanize action from their constituents. They, at state and federal levels across the country, have been succeeding at putting us in a box and stripping us of our identities. We've been segregated from the spaces where we belong. Even at 17 years old, I have had to stay vigilant when simply using the restroom meant for women like myself. Now I ask, what is your plan to protect trans people and our rights?
Great, thank you so much. Okay, all right, let me try and get through these so we can get to the other side and do as many as we can. So on the services for sexual assault survivors, when I was in the state legislature, we actually funded finally the backlog of rape kits and sexual assault nurses. And I feel like we've taken a lot of steps backward. And part of it from the federal perspective has been that the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization used to be a bipartisan thing. 172 Republicans voted against it in 2021. And we've seen the federal funding just continue to go down. And at the same time, we've seen the awareness of sexual assault survivors go up, right? So there's more demand now for people coming forward. And I think we just have to continue at the state level, work with Tina Orwell, who's been, trying to push on this, I know. But it is a real problem, what you're identifying. And you combine with that the fact that hospitals, because of the healthcare system, are under attack, and they're getting rid of a lot of these really, really critical programs. So my commitment to you is I will do everything I can to continue to increase funding for sexual assault, rape, other kinds of violence, through the appropriations process and through the reauthorization. But thank you so much for speaking up, and know that we are watching this and very worried about it. In fact, I brought it up in the hearing that we had last week. Around the federal funding for the diplomatic fellowship programs, Kevin, thank you so much for the question. This has been a real problem. Look, the State Department has gotten rid of all of this, right? The Defense Department has gotten rid of, HEGSETH is getting rid of a lot of the feeder organizations that lead people into public service, whether it's in the State Department or the armed forces. And so what we need to do is restore the funding for these programs, but we are fighting with Rubio at every step of the way. I mean, he's gotten rid of all, look, this is a State Department that doesn't really believe in a lot of the things that the State Department is supposed to do, including these fellowships. But make sure you connect with one of my staff so we can look into your case in particular. Maybe we can write a letter on your behalf. Maybe there's something else that we can do, and we will definitely track it down. But the problem of getting rid of these fellowships into the State Department has been kind of those aren't the only two. It's been a universal problem under this administration. So thank you for applying, and thank you for your interest, and we'll keep trying to do what we can to restore that funding. The forensic experts and financial experts on Epstein, well, what we are doing is we're trying to subpoena the people that were involved in this scandal. So you might have seen that we have forced a number of subpoena votes, that we've managed to get some Republicans with us. And so we're trying to bring some of these high profile people, including the accountants, including, I don't know if you read the horrific story about the doctors, the ring of doctors that were facilitating all of this. We're looking at whether there's state action that can be taken, particularly in the state of New York, because that seems to be, Mount Sinai seems to be a center of locus for that. But I know from talking to the survivors that there is all of that evidence in the files. We need to get the remaining 3 million files released. And there are lots of people across the country that are now working on the information that's in the files, but there's still a lot that's redacted. So when they uploaded a lot of the files, particularly in the state investigations, a lot of the stuff was redacted, and it stayed redacted. And so that, when they say unredacted files, they're not. I have a whole list of files that have a lot of that information that is still redacted. So I think we're kind of working on all these levels to try and get that information out. And the survivor testimonies, in my opinion, are some of the most damning. And getting these folks who were overseeing the financial operation and at the banks, right? The people who were heading up these banks, those are some of the people we've subpoenaed now. So let's see if we can get them in front of us. On Iran, look, this is a complicated issue. I'm not trying to say that I have the answer for all of it. And I know that the Iranian American community is very divided. I hear from, no, I understand. I hear from you all. I also hear from others who feel very differently about this, not about the Iranian people, but about the solution. And so I'm willing to continue to be in conversation with you. I do work with NIAC. I think that they are, but I think NIAC is a very important organization, and I do work with them. I understand that not everyone feels the same way. I get it. But I'm happy to have the conversation. I don't think we're going to answer it here, and I think you may not agree with me. And, you know, I love when people agree with me on 100% of issues, but I've been married to my husband, who's here somewhere, for decades, and we don't agree on 100% of issues, but we still love each other. So I think we just have to recognize, ma'am, I understand, but I want to get to the other questions because other people also deserve the right to have their voices heard, and I'm happy to discuss it with you at any time. And so on climate change, yes, we are frogs in a boiling water. And did you ask that question? Yeah. And we are, you know, we made so much progress on the Inflation Reduction Act, and now almost all of that has been rolled back. All the tax credits have been rolled back. All the work that we did has been rolled back. But I do think that if we are able to, right now we're focused on just stopping a lot of the bad things from happening. But we need to have, we can't just be an opposition party, we also have to be a proposition party. And we have a whole list of things because we know that this is an existential issue. I've been trying to do small things like getting community-based project funding for initiatives that take on sea level rise, a number of other issues, but they're they're relatively small in the grand scheme of things, right? And so we are working with all the climate groups to just put together a proactive agenda. And it can't just be all about tax credits because that's not going to fix the problem. I thought that at the time, but we made a huge investment in climate and we just need to continue to do more. Um, and then on trans people, where are you? There you are, yes. Thank you so much for your question. You may know that this is a very personal issue for me. I introduced the Trans Bill of Rights. And when I first got into Congress, we worked with Lavender Rights Project and many other organizations across the country to really figure out how to craft a bill that would speak to all of the rights of trans people to be who they are and to live freely. And the attacks that have been launched against trans people, just like I said, immigrants aren't raising your rents, trans people aren't raising your rents, trans people aren't driving up your costs. And yet it's another group of people that are being demonized and harmed so deeply. And it's such a tiny percentage of the population just trying to live freely as who you are. And so my heart goes out to you. I'm going to continue to be on the front lines of championing trans rights and making sure that every single trans person in this country knows that we see you, we love you, you belong here, and you deserve to be who you are.
I'll try and keep this brief. I would appreciate if you could comment on two subjects. The first subject is gerontocracy. We are currently ruled over by people who should have been retired 20 years ago. And they don't know how the internet works, they don't know what social media is, and this is insane. Why are our leaders so old and refusing to step aside and make room for younger folks? I would really like to see leaders who actually have to live with the consequences of the decisions that they're making. And then two, accountability. Historically, the United States has really sucked at political accountability. We didn't do it after the Civil War. We didn't do it after Watergate. Why should I believe that we're going to do it now?
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work so far. So you're definitely for peace. So we have an out of control, convicted criminal felon president that's starting many wars, Venezuela, Iran, which is turning into a world war. So you have to follow the money. So why not cut the military budget by 99%?
Great. Love that question. Thank you.
Congresswoman, before I start, I just want to thank the staff one more time. They probably don't get paid a lot. I know they work a lot. So, yeah.
Yay!
You're a leader in the progressive community. I grew up in a progressive family. We have a lot of concerns in the Jewish community where we obviously, the majority of us have a lot of policy disagreements with you on Israel, but that's not really the crux of our concerns. The concerns are the rhetoric that you put out, where with tweets you put out, it seems like Israel is the only nation on earth that's ever done anything wrong. And when you were on Dana Bash's show on CNN, she asked about sexual assault during October 7th. And then you couldn't say it was wrong without, in the same breath, saying the Palestinians too, but you were able to say what happened to the Palestinians is wrong. I would love to meet with you at some point to give them trust between our communities again.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Luis Sanchez. I came to this country as an immigrant when I was a kid, worked the fields right here in Washington State. My parents, I'm the first in my family to graduate from high school and undergrad. Now I'm a medical student at the University of Washington School of Medicine, which is, as you probably already know, the #1 primary care school in the country. But we see a massive disconnect in how we build our healthcare workforce. Institutions like, and especially the University of Washington School of Medicine, actively recruit students of color and those from disadvantaged backgrounds because they know that we are the ones who will return to serve communities that look like us. But the reality is, the massive upfront debt of medical education acts as a gatekeeper. It forces students from low-income backgrounds either out of the profession entirely or away from primary care and into high-paying specialties just to survive the loans.
Mhm.
We are recruited to diversify the field, but left to drown in debt. So my question is, what are your specific plans at the federal level to drastically increase scholarships and direct funding for medical trainees so we aren't just recruited, but actually financially supported in building a primary care workforce that reflects our communities?
Great question. Thank you, Luis.
First of all, thank you so much for being a strong voice for us in DC. My question is, as a small business owner here in Seattle, we work to support other small women-owned businesses. And what we have seen in the last year is federal funding for grants to support things like the exporting programs, the STEP program, the grants that are supposed to go to the women's business centers. That money has been appropriated, but those organizations are not receiving that funding. The people who work in those areas are being laid off. They don't have the money, and all of the businesses that use that funding to grow, hire, become bigger businesses, pay more taxes, they don't have access to those funds either. The money's been appropriated, but the SBA is not sending it out, and I want to know, where is that money?
Great. Thank you. That was the last one? Okay, I'm sorry to the two folks that are in line. We're being told we got to finish up here, but let me, and please ask your questions of the staff so I can make sure to answer them later. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I feel like since we gave you a shot, go ahead, sir. Get your last question in.
Hey, just really quick. I am an Afghanistan war veteran. I am a former Sergeant of Marines. We have been at war my entire life. I met a lot of Marines. Literally, none of them have said that they want to die for Israel. When are we going to address the deeply, deeply troubling relationship that Israel has to the United States, and particularly Congress of the United States? Very high, powerful people in our government, and all of them are taking money. Not you. I looked it up.
I don't.
I'm so proud of you.
I don't. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay, the gerontocracy, look, I support term limits. I mean, I just think that we should have term limits for members of Congress. It doesn't have to be short because it does take time. But listen, even if people had 5 terms or 8 terms to serve, that would give you I mean, honestly, I'd go for 10 terms at this point. That would give you a chance to do your work and then to move on. And that is not necessarily a popular sentiment within Congress. But I do think we need to address the fact that we need to build leadership and we need to bring more people in. And when people stay so long, and it doesn't mean that everyone above a certain age is not capable of doing the job. That's not true. It isn't true. But we have an age limit for when somebody can get into the presidency, right? Into Congress, but we don't have it on the other side. And so I just think we should be fair about this because on the Republican side, by the way, they have term limits on chairmanships, which at least allows people to circle through as chairs. We don't have that on the Democratic side. And I just think we have to address this. I agree with you, sir. And then accountability, why should you believe it? Look, this is just going to take all of us. We didn't hold the president accountable for trying to steal an election in 2020 and launching an insurrection on the United States Capitol, the worst assault on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. And so we have to understand that this is the consequence of not doing that. And we're going to have to demand accountability. How do we do it? I don't know. We're all going to have to make sure. Well, we've impeached him a couple of times in the House. I've been on that committee. The problem has been in the Senate where they don't convict. And we should get rid of the filibuster, by the way, also for, that's not related to impeachment, but that is the challenge, is that the founders assumed that the checks and balances they brought in necessitated and would enable people of the same party to vote against somebody who was violating the Constitution. They didn't account for what happens when it's a cult party, and those people refuse to actually do what they're supposed to do with the Constitution. On the military budget, 100%. I have, every year since I've gotten in, I have introduced amendments to cut the military budget. You said by 99%. I was just going for a simple 10%. My amendments never get accepted, but I think it is important to push it out because there is so much fraud, waste, fraud, and abuse within the Pentagon. This is the only agency that has never passed an audit. It has failed every federal audit, and yet we keep giving them more and more and more money. And those of us who vote against it sometimes are called unpatriotic, but because we don't support the military. That is not true. We just want our Defense Department to actually be a department of peace, to consider that we go to war when we need to go to war, but we don't do it to enrich the pockets of 5 for-profit defense contractors, because that's who's getting the money. Sir, in the Jewish community, I am very happy to sit down with anybody, and I'm happy to sit down with you. I don't know where you are, but there you are. And I understand that there are people in the Jewish community who don't agree with everything I've said. There are also a lot of people who do. This is the challenge with these issues. They're complex. And what I want is peace and security for the Jewish people. I want the Jewish people to live alongside the Palestinian people with freedom, with liberation. And I don't have, I think it is very, very important that we recognize all of the complexities here, and I'm happy to build that relationship with you anytime you want. Luis, there you are. Thank you so much for, and what an amazing story you have. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing and for serving our communities. I have a number of bills that are about supporting the medical workforce, but I also have bills that are specifically about getting rid of debt in education. I mean, we are the richest country in the world, and if you look across the board at, you know, undergraduate education, trade schools, and higher education, medical education, my College for All Act doesn't address graduate school education, but my Medicare for All bill does, because we actually invest in the workforce at the same time. And it's crazy to me that we don't invest in education, in higher education for people, because at the end of the day, we're the richest country in the world, and we have people with the most education debt in the world. And nobody else in the world understands it, because they all get that a doctor like you going to serve our underserved communities, or communities that just need your particular set of skills, all the things that you offer, that's an investment for us. It's not just an investment in you, it's an investment for us. So we'll continue to work on that. And I know that that is a very big frustration, because it does drive a lot of people away. And in the medical field right now, we're seeing so many people exit the medical field, not only for that reason, but also because our medical professionals have told me time and time again that they don't want to, you know, they take an oath to take care of their patients. And now it's the private insurance companies, the for-profit drug companies, they're minting money, but you're not being allowed to actually serve your patients. So thank you so much for what you do, and we'll continue. Right, no, exactly. It's completely, it's a perfect way to drive people away if that's what we wanted to do. Small business, lady, there you are, thank you. If there's a specific case, we're happy to work with you and see if we can help. We have a great constituent services group. But this is a big problem. We have authorized so much money, we've appropriated the money, and then it doesn't come down. And you've seen, we've had to file court cases about so much of this money, but let us work with you. Just talk to any one of our staff, and if you have specific cases, let us see if there's anything we can do to help you. But it's a huge problem with every one of these agencies. They're not paying attention to Congress. And then we have to sue them, but that takes a long time, right? And so in the meantime, small businesses are suffering. And then we've talked about Iran, ma'am, so, you know, I just don't know that we're going to agree here. But thank you for voicing your opinion. It's important to me to hear from everyone. And then to our last speaker, the gentleman, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. I really, really appreciate it and applaud you. And I also hear the deep pain in your voice about the fact that we've been in these forever wars. And in terms of this particular US-Israel relationship, look, you saw what I wrote about this war. It was raised by somebody who didn't agree with me, but I don't understand why we don't uphold our own domestic laws and require anybody that we give money to comply with our domestic laws and with international humanitarian law. And somehow there's a lobby force that is very, very strong in this area, as there is with many others. I have never taken AIPAC money. In fact, they keep trying to take me out. And so every cycle I get, you know, threats about trying to take me out and people who are trying to run against me solely on this issue. And I'm always prepared because I'm proud that I get the most votes of any member of Congress anywhere in the country. Thank you all very much for voting for me. And I am going to be true to my constituents and to the United States of America. I'm not against any other country, but I think countries have to work with us and follow our laws, and that we have to be very clear about what is standing up for America, what that looks like. And that doesn't mean isolationist. I'm not an isolationist. I've worked all over the world. I've lived all over the world. I believe we should be in relationship with countries, but I don't believe that we should put any government's policy ahead of our own. So I thank you for your service, and I'm sorry that we haven't treated you and others who serve in the armed forces and sacrifice your lives in many cases and put yourself in harm's way to hold up our Constitution. I'm sorry that we haven't treated you better, but I promise that I will continue to fight for you and continue to fight for all those who serve in our armed forces, that your lives are meaningful to us, and that we're going to make sure that we only put you in that situation when we know what we're doing, when we actually support you, when we know how to get you out, when we're not just putting you in a forever war because somebody else tells us to or because it is one man's opinion. Thank you so much, sir. All right, everybody. That was a lot. Thank you all so much for sticking it out. Thank you for being a part of our democracy. And thank you for refusing to be hopeless or powerless, because we, the people, have the power. Thank you all so much and have a great night.